Hi, I'm Becca, and this is my BookTube. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you're watching this video after watching a previous video. Welcome if you are new here. It has been a while. I had a big gap where I didn't make any videos, and then I was like, I'm gonna get back to being on schedule, and then I did not. This fall was very crazy, very busy. I just didn't make time to make videos. I've kind of fallen behind, and I also haven't read a ton of books, and so there wasn't really a lot for me to talk to you guys about. But now we're essentially gonna do September, October, November, last 4 months of the year wrap up with my reading. And I'm gonna show you guys the stuff that I got for Christmas and also talk a little bit about my plans for 2026. Yeah, let's just get to the book recaps. In September, I read Wild Reverence and A Steeping of Blood. Both were books that I bought as new releases. Both were from authors that I had read previously. Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross is set in the world of Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, but it's kind of a prequel to those books. There are like gods and goddesses talked about and like magic and mythology talked about in those two books that you get some background on when you're reading the duology, but this book definitely laid a heavier foundation for that magic system. It was very fun to read about that. Rebecca Ross is incredibly talented, so obviously it was really, really enjoyable. There were a lot of moments that I absolutely loved. I am, like most people, I would think, a sucker for a character that I feel like looks like me, and I feel like the description of Matilda, which is the main character, almost identically matches me. She has a very similar hair color to me, similar eye color to me, freckles, all these kinds of things, and so it felt like just so personal to read, and it was a very beautiful love story. She is so good at crafting relationships, and it was a very beautiful romance story, and I should have seen it coming, but I got so caught up in the story that I did not. But the ending, like, this is a slight spoiler, but if you've read Rebecca Ross, you know what I'm talking about. She has a penchant for bringing your characters very close together and then pulling them apart and making you feel like, oh no, they had such a beautiful love and it was lost. And then working her magic and bringing them back together in the end in like such a gorgeous, tangible, like realistic way. And it makes me cry every single time. And I made a reel about the reuniting of the characters, and it hit me so hard. Their moment, they're like, made me cry, made me want to scream and freak out, but it was like 2 in the morning and everyone in my house was asleep, so I couldn't. Moment happened on page 513. My wedding anniversary with my husband is May 13th, which is 513. So like 513 is a like important number for us. 13 is our special number and stuff. And so I just, Rebecca Ross is so talented and so amazing, and I cannot recommend her enough because she's so good. Wild Reverence, absolutely, without a doubt, 5-star book. Gut-wrenching, gorgeous. There's a really beautiful like adoptive parent storyline to it, which I always love, and I feel like she has written into several of her stories. Wild Reverence didn't feel predictable to me. I felt like I was on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what was happening next, and had a lot of great emotional hooks. Moving on. A Steeping of Blood by Faisal. It's the sequel to A Tempest of Tea, which I read in March. And I did a whole video about, and I was obsessed with, and I loved it. Like so in love with this story. I went to start reading A Steeping of Blood because I bought it the week it came out, and could not remember what had happened in A Tempest of Tea. Like I completely forgot the ending. I had to go back and get A Tempest of Tea on my Kindle, so I went back and read the last couple chapters to refresh my memory. I should have done a full reread, but the last couple chapters sufficed. And there were parts of it that I really enjoyed. There was a romance that I really liked in it. But overall, I felt like the characters in the second book were not the same characters in the first book. And I know that they were all kind of reacting to things that had happened in the first book, but I really felt like some of their behaviors, it always bothers me when there's like characters are changed and people are like, oh, well, they're changed because of this thing that happened. And I'm like, yeah, I agree that that thing happened and that would cause someone to change. But I don't ever feel like the change makes sense. If the change makes sense, if the behavior makes sense, I am all for it. But like, I felt very confused for a lot of the book. I felt like there were a lot of scenes where like the characters were said to be placed somewhere in the room or grabbing something or hanging off of something or doing this stunt, and I couldn't understand how to visualize that and like what that was supposed to look like. Like physiologically it wasn't making sense, and I don't know if it was like I was reading it wrong or it just was written in a confusing way. I loved the main character in the first book. Her name is Arthi. I just feel like we lost her in the second book, and that was kind of a bummer. And I also disliked the ending. I can't say anything outside of that without spoiling the book. It was okay. I think I might have given it like a 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Maybe not. I don't know. But I don't know if I would really recommend that one. I kind of almost like the idea of only reading A Tempest of Tea and not reading A Steeping of Blood, and just leaving A Tempest of Tea on the like, well, actually, what I would really love would be to finish A Tempest of Tea and read the first couple chapters of Steeping of Blood and then just stop there. Just to get like a little close off from the cliffhanger ending of In A Tempest of Tea, that we get like a little bit of closure in the first couple chapters of A Steeping of Blood and then just stop right there. Then that's where the story ends, and that's where we create a happily ever after from those couple chapters and move on with our lives. So I probably just do that. Moving on. In October, the 3 books that I read in October were Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. A lot of people talked about this book a couple years ago when it initially came out, but I could never pinpoint what it was. Like, what was the book about? What is this book? What is it? Everyone would talk about how amazing it was and stuff. So I finally picked that up from the library and gave it a shot. Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber, because it was my first book of the month. And then I also read Red City by Marie Lu, which was my second book of the month from the Book of the Month box. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin wrecked me. I simultaneously loved and hated this book so much. I haven't decided if I'm gonna get a shelf trophy of it. The main 2 characters are this boy and girl who meet each other in a hospital when they're young. The girl is there because she has a sister who is sick and is getting treatment, so she's there because her family is there. The boy is there because he was injured and is having to have repeated surgeries and treatments for an injury. It's set in the 80s at the start of it, like the late 80s. And so he's in this like rec room type place and he's playing a video game, and so she goes and sits down next to him and watches him play, and they talk, and she kind of helps him spot things that he's not necessarily seeing on screen. They work together to complete levels together. Then she ends up needing service hours, and someone tells her to have the hospital sign away like a paper saying that she's getting her service hours by being there with him, but she doesn't tell him about it. And then when he finds out, he gets mad at her, and so they have this. There's a constant miscommunication trope throughout this whole book. And every time it happened, I got more and more angry. I hate the miscommunication trope. I hate it. Then they go to school together. They somewhat interact, but they don't really build much of a friendship. But he likes her from a distance, I think. And then when they're both in college age, they spot each other at a subway train station thing. They start talking because of that, because they're both in video game development. Then they work on building a video game together, and that's the basis of them having contact and having a relationship together for the rest of the book. And then his roommate ends up becoming another primary character, and the 3 of them the story goes through the 3 of them like building this video game together and producing it and building a company together. It was very fun for me to read because I enjoy video games, and I related a lot to the girl sitting next to him playing the video game because that's how I was kind of introduced to video games. My older sister would play and I would sit next to her and watch because I was not good at playing them. So that felt very real to me. The idea that sometimes the funnest way to play a video game, especially back then when there were less two-player games, was sitting next to someone and them playing and you being their kind of like second pair of eyes, their sidekick, their additional puzzle solver and things like that. Again, I hated the miscommunication trope that happened in it a lot. The writing style was very, very easy to read. The narration was really good, and I could just kind of sit and binge it, which I really liked. I like being able to binge a book. I don't like when trying to read a book feels like it takes me forever because the narration is hard to grasp. And then my final thought comment about this book is that I ugly cried and screamed at a lot of the final pages. A lot of the ending chapters just ripped me to shreds, and I sat there screaming, "I hate you," at this book. I was so messed up from reading it. I felt like I had such shell shock from reading it, and it was a great experience to read, but I'm so conflicted about how I feel about it. But yeah, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, if you like contemporary fiction, if you like video game references, if you don't mind the miscommunication trope, you'll really, really enjoy it. I thought it was really, really well done. After reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I read Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. Love her fantasy books. I read the Caraval trilogy, and then I read her Jax and Ava story. I'm pretty sure the third book I read within a 24-hour period because I just could not get away from it. It was so good. I love her writing. She makes such great, like, tangible scenes. One of my favorite things about the Caraval books is the like synesthesia that one of the characters has, and like Stephanie Garber makes such great descriptions that like everything feels so incredibly vivid. Not so much that you're like lost in all of the details, but enough to make it feel very real. Alchemy of Secrets, the idea is that there's this professor at a university in California, in LA, that teaches this secret class that's about like folklore that exists in California, especially surrounding LA. And one of the main points of the class is that there's this like devil character that if you go to the right bar and order a specific drink, that he'll show up and you can give him the drink and he'll tell you a secret or grant you a wish, is what it was. So our main character has been taking this class and she is trying to get the wish, I think because she wants her parents back. Her parents are missing or something. Passed away. I can't even remember. Anyways, it's coming up on Halloween, and then she has just like a slew of strange events, and she ends up in this like wild goose chase, on the run type thing. Like very early 2000s, like runaway caper, like Jason Bourne type situation where like these people are showing up and you have to get away from them and all these kinds of things. There's two different male characters that she keeps like bouncing back and forth between, of like whether or not she trusts them, whether or not she can run away with them. One of them claims to know her sister. Well, there's this like secret organization that she's trying to figure out if that organization is trustworthy or not. There's murder. So yeah, it's very cool. I think like one of her parents was like a famous Hollywood, no, both of her parents were famous Hollywood people. One was like a director, one was like an actress. And there's this like massive lore around them. People don't know that it's her parents because she changed her name after they passed away and all this kind of stuff. Very cool, very fun. There were parts of it where I felt like I wasn't sure what was happening, but it was also the kind of story where like there's so much magic happening that you kind of don't need to always track what's happening. It depends on the book. Certain books I'm like, I really need to understand what's happening. And then some books I'm like, we're just here for the ride. So that one, fun ride. I was there for the ride. I almost wish there was more. It felt like I was watching a movie And I really felt like there were some scenes that I would have really loved to go deeper with, and they kind of get like half explained at the end, and I just feel like it would have been so much more amazing if those scenes had been played out a little bit more. There's like a memory situation that happens, or kind of like a clock reset situation that happens, and it would have been very fun and interesting to like read the same chapter twice from like different time points. But I think that that one's meant to be part of a series, so we'll see what we get later from Stephanie Garber. But yeah, she's always fun to read. I feel like I took a hard detour left, whatever phrase you want to use, when we then moved on to Red City, because Alchemy of Secrets I think was technically like her first like adult book, in the sense that her character was more mature, and there was like slightly more intimacy happening in it than a lot of her other books, but it's still Stephanie Garber and she's still sugary sweet. Red City, not sugary sweet. Red City was hard. It is being introduced as the debut novel in a series. Right off the bat, I need to say I hated the writing style. It was like present progressive. It was very difficult to read, and I would get very confused and lost very quickly in the sentence structure. We follow two characters, a girl and a boy. They meet each other when they're young. He kind of gets cherry picked. She kind of falls into knowing about alchemy, and there's this like secret underground world where alchemists exist and manipulate the world around them and do these things, and there's different organizations of alchemy groups throughout the world in different areas. There's two of them in the area where they live in California, and so he gets recruited into one. She kind of stumbles across the other, and there's a miscommunication trope because they have to keep the alchemy thing a secret. It's very much a if you're not in it you can't know about it type thing, but they make a ton of money. The reason she ends up in it is because her and her mom are poor, and she wants to be able to provide safety for her mom and stability for their family. And so she goes and stumbles across the alchemy group and gets a job learning alchemy with them and becoming part of their organization. She gets paid really well and takes care of herself and her mom. And the boy was living in another country, I believe, like Western Asia, like India type area, and he got picked from that place and brought to the United States. Was told him coming to learn alchemy was going to take care of his poor family. They were going to be provided for, have stability, and like, so that's the thing, is they kind of get these people by offering them this security, but then they're kind of trapped and they can't leave and they can't make other choices outside of what's being decided for them. And both of them become very, very successful in their organizations. Their organizations oppose each other, and they like each other, but they don't ever really admit fully to liking each other, and those situations always bug me. They have a moment where they kind of admit to liking each other, but it's when they like think they're never going to see each other again. So it's this like parting of ways. They sort of have relationships with other people. It is very adult. There's definitely content in it that is not appropriate compared to some of the other books that I read, but it was well written. I thought it made sense to the story. But the plot development, the character interactions, all of these different things like just consumed my mind. I really loved the magic system, hated the secrecy trope. And I'm not sure if I'm going to read the sequel. I have yet to decide, because I do want to know what happens with these characters, but I also, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't want the main characters to be with each other, and that looks like that's where it's going. But there's also a really bad betrayal trope that happens that I wish hadn't happened, but made sense to the story, so I'm really conflicted. So that was October. In November, I read A Forbidden Alchemy, I don't remember who the author is, but what I do remember is that I saw this book on the shelf at Target months ago. I took a picture of the cover essentially to tell myself, like, I want to read this book at some point. And then it popped up on Kindle Unlimited. Went to read it. It's very funny to look at this and see kind of like a weird trickle effect of what happened, because these books I have Alchemy of Secrets. Red City was then about an alchemy group. And then I have A Forbidden Alchemy, and I read those books in order unintentionally. So alchemy is apparently on the rise. But A Forbidden Alchemy, the story goes that in this world, a divine, gifted people with magical abilities to control elements, and whenever people turn 12, they leave their home for the day to go to this city, like this big central city, to be tested to see if they possess any magical giftings, and if they do, what kind and how strong. It's not necessarily optional. So the two main characters that we meet, the boy doesn't care. He doesn't want magical powers. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be part of this. The girl desperately wants it. She wants to leave her town. She wants to get away from her life, and she wants to go be something more. Both of them are going to be in the last group to be called, so they're waiting for a very, very, very long time for their turn to go do the assessment. And they're hanging out, they're bored, they're doing all these things. He decides that he wants to go be silly and have some fun, and he gets her to go with him through like the back door of the building, in through the kitchen, to find a snack or something. They catch a glimpse of other people doing their assessment, and they have to like drink this liquid and then see what happens when they try to engage with like the elemental magic. And then they're almost caught being where they're not supposed to be, so they sneak down into this basement area to hide, and while they're down there they find out the assessment is rigged. They find out children from their area are consistently never allowed to take the real assessment, because no one wants these like outer reach kids coming in and being part of the magic users. They have the choice to either stay ignorant, not do the real assessment, or like get their way into the real assessment basically. And so they each make a choice, and the boy, kind of predictably by how the characters have been set up, he does not take the real assessment and he goes home. She does take the real assessment and she gets to be part of the group. There are lies and secrets that have to be built around her joining, so that way their secret doesn't get out. And then later on, the secret does start to come out. And I feel like we can all guess and assume that the secret has come out because of the boy who went back, because he was the only one who knew. There's like a rebellion that grows, and she leaves the city because the city is attacked. She ends up reconnecting with this boy. It grows from there, and it's very, very fun. The characters were amazing, so well developed. There's so many characters, and they're so fun to read because they were all so singularly whole. I really, really love when I'm reading an ensemble type cast where the characters are individuals and they're not one note or flat. They are all very full and developed characters. The story I felt like was super believable. The writing style was really, really good. The magic system was amazing. And I am definitely going to read the next book. Definitely a really, really good read. Also more adult, very similar to Red City, very adult content. So that was November. Didn't really have a ton of time for reading, and the little bit of time that I did, I spent reading Shadows of What We Lost, I think is what it's called. I got like halfway through that book on Kindle Unlimited, and I just felt like nothing had happened. It's much more of an epic fantasy, and I wasn't in the right place for that, so I was like, I'm gonna shelf this and find something else to read. A friend was getting rid of some books, and she sent me The Kingdom of Sweets. It was from Book of the Month from a couple years ago. The premise seemed very, very interesting. The opening of the book was very, very fun and exciting. It's meant to be a Nutcracker retelling, and in this story of the Nutcracker, the family doesn't just have Clara and the little boy, I can't remember his name, but her little brother, there's a twin. Her name is Natasha. Her and Clara are opposites. Clara is blonde and pale eyes and beautiful and light and good and likable and lovable. And then Natasha is dark hair, you know, darker eyes. She's viewed as this like dark, not as good person. Not because she does anything wrong, but just a cliche narrative of people don't like her as much as they like Clara. She's more introverted and less sociable and those kinds of things. We have the typical Nutcracker evening story where Drosselmeyer brings gifts and things like that. There are a couple other gifts that are brought that weren't in the original story. And Drosselmeyer doesn't just bring one boy with him. He brings like a whole group of boys with him. And then there's this like older like teenage boy. Also in this story, Clara and Natasha are 16. So there's this other teenage boy that Natasha has a conversation with that's with Drosselmeyer, but it's kind of like a weird conversation. And I honestly thought by how he was introduced that he was going to have a much larger role to play in the story, and he didn't. I essentially halfway DNF'd this. I did the thing that I will do quite often with books that are not going well, is I got like a little around halfway through and I felt like nothing was happening, and I was getting very tired of the narration because the narration made no sense and was going nowhere. And so I skimmed through the pages and I would pick up different things that were happening in the paragraphs, and I was speed reading through some pages. I was catching the dialogue and seeing what was going on between the characters, and it wasn't very much. I didn't enjoy it. I was kind of bummed out. I'm glad I got that book for free. I now understand why my friend got rid of it. And I also felt very validated because I checked Goodreads afterwards, and a lot of people felt the same way I did about it lacked plot. It felt very, very much to me like The Night Circus. So, you know, maybe if you like a narration that's more about like setting the scene than about things happening, then you might like it. But I really felt like it had no plot. I feel like it had no purpose. I really thought like the Nutcracker was also going to play a bigger part, and I feel like the Nutcracker had almost no role in the whole story. Then right now I'm reading The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk by Carissa Broadbent. I was hoping I was going to finish reading it before recording this, but I'm at like the 80% mark, I think. Should be done with it like today or tomorrow. I almost didn't read it, and then the other day I was at the store, so I like opened it to flip to like a random middle part to see what the story looked like. I read an interaction between two of the characters, so I came home and I downloaded it on Kindle Unlimited, and it has some really, really good parts. It has excellent spice. Very, very good spice. Very much, again, an adult content book. Some parts of the magic are good. Some parts of the characters' interactions are good. Carissa is a good author. I just am not that invested in what is happening in the story. I'm just gonna finish it because I've read the other books in the series that it's part of. It's part of her Crowns of Nyaxia series. It's part of that world, and I've read the other books that exist in that world, and I just want to finish this one. I really, really liked the first two, especially the first one. The thing that I'm noticing about a lot of Carissa's books, which I feel like worked out okay for the first one because of the type of book that it was, and now the rest of them, it's just frustrating me. Almost every single chapter ends with this like dun dun dun. Like, you don't ever really end a chapter feeling like it was closed. Every chapter feels like it's trying to bust the door open for the next chapter. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes that's how you know, get people to go to the next chapter. But I also feel like if you do that every single time, it makes your chapters so predictable and exhausting. I, as a reader, would much rather have that happen every once in a while than having it happen constantly. I remember it was one of my least favorite parts about book 2, was feeling like every single time we were just like getting to like solid storytelling that we would hit this like, oh my god, this catastrophic thing happened at the end of this chapter and you have to turn the page to find out what happens next. Like, I almost defiantly would not go to the next chapter, and I would just put the book down because I was so frustrated. But so yeah, that's where I'm closing out the year with my reading. Oh my god, this video is gonna be so long. Super quick. The 2 books that I got for Christmas were Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion, which I have already read but needed a shelf trophy of because the one that I read I borrowed from the library. and Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, because I have yet to read a Brandon Sanderson book to completion. I read the beginning of Trust in the Emerald Sea and couldn't get into it, and then I read half of Warbreaker and have not finished it yet. Maybe someday I will, but everyone that I see online loves Brandon Sanderson. People love this series, and I want to know why, so I'm gonna get into it, and I'm excited. That's gonna be one of the first things that I do when I start a new book this year. I am on a little bit of a reading slash book buying ban for this month. I'm finishing The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk, just so that way I can set that aside and be done. But then this month I'm trying really hard to focus on writing. I'm trying to be consistent with my writing and be conscious of the amount of time that I'm spending on social media and doom scrolling when I could be engaging my brain creatively and writing instead. But also, I got this reading journal from the Dollar Spot in Target, and I'm looking forward to using this for my reading tracking this year. What I want to try to be more intentional about this year is keeping notes of the books while I'm reading them, so that way when it's time to recap them, they're a little more concise. Sorry that this video is so long. If you watched all the way to the end, I really appreciate your support. Tell me what books you got for Christmas, if you got any, what books you are looking forward to reading this year. In February, 2 of my author friends are publishing books. One is an indie author, and one is an indie author who has finally gotten her traditional publishing debut, and I'm so excited. I'm really hoping that my Barnes & Noble will have her books on their shelf, because that would just be like the coolest thing ever to see. Those are the first 2 books that I plan on buying in February when it's time to break my book buying ban. And to break my reading ban is I'm going to buy my friends' books and read my friends' books, and I'm going to tell everyone to go and enjoy them. They're both really talented, so I have no doubt that their books are going to be amazing. Definitely going to make a video at least about the traditionally published one. Might also make one about the indie one. Very excited for supporting my fellow author friends, and I'm also trying to get excited for myself for pursuing my writing more this year and doing a better job with that. Thanks for hanging out and listening. Welcome to 2026. Hopefully it is better than 2025 for everybody. Like and subscribe. See you around. Bye.